Hello guys, welcome to another video. And in this video I'm going to be telling you which type of feed, pellet or mash, which is better. So stay tuned as we discuss about it. Okay, welcome back. So like I told you earlier, in this video we're going to be talking about pellet feed and mash feed, which is better for your birds. And I want you to understand something before we go on. And you know, pellet and mash, they are basically the same nutrients required for the growth of your birds, the same almost the same amount of proteins depending on the manufacturing company, and every other thing is just similar. It's just the required nutrients for your birds. Now the difference between these two is the mash feed is just like the feed that is being mixed, the required nutrients just mixed up for the birds. But the pellet feed is the nutrients being compressed together. Now the two difference between these is that one is compressed and one is just mixed as mash, just like that. And so if you are into poultry already, you must have come across these two different kinds of feeds. And I have to recommend on my own side, the pellet feed is better. Pellet feed is better than the mash feed. Pellet feed is always better than the mash feed. Now there are a few disadvantages of mash over pellet. That means pellet has more advantage over mash. The reason being that pellet carries almost all nutrients. Now if you notice, whenever you feed your birds with mash, they tend to select, because birds are lovers of grains, and so they select grains. You see them selecting the maize in it, the maize content in it, and different grains that they can find available in the mash feed. But when it's pellet, they just have to pick it the way it is and take it like that. So that's the main difference. So if you want uniformity in birds, I will always suggest you go for pellet, especially if you are rearing brooders, because you come to discover that at the end of the day, some are heavier than others. This is because there's always a difference in the feed, always a difference in the nutrients they take in. This bird is taking in more nutrients than the other bird is taking in. So you have to weigh these two together, and I will advise you to go for the pellet. Now, one thing pellet feed does is that it requires less energy. The pellet, when the birds are eating pellet, they don't spend much energy to eat pellet. Now if you notice, when you give them mash, they take a longer time to feed on mash. But when you give them pellet, you discover that in a very short time, you can be standing there and they will empty it. You can be standing there, you will see the birds clear up the tray. Even when they are satisfied, they just keep going and keep going until they clear up the tray. You see their crop so big, you know. So pellet feed gives them less energy. It requires less energy for them to feed. Pellet feed requires less energy for them to do. They just feed on the birds, on the pellet, easier than they feed on the mash. So also another advantage of pellet is that there's a higher feed to body conversion ratio. Feed to weight conversion ratio. Now when they are taking mash, like I told you earlier, you discover that the birds at the end of the day or at the harvest period, they are not uniform. This is because some birds are taking in more nutrients. Even when if it's layers, they are laying birds, you discover that some eggs are quite larger than others. This is because some are not feeding enough. Some are not taking the required nutrients. Why? Because, you know, like I used to have, when I have some layers when I started newly, I discovered there were different sizes of eggs. And I was like, what's causing this? And I come to discover that at the end of the day, when I feed them with mash, I see that they select all the grains in it and just leave the dust over there. But thank God I get to understand on time. So when I begin to give them pellets, I discover that everybody has to eat the way it is, the pellet form. And so by the time they finish eating that pellet form, I discovered a uniformity in their weight and everything else in their harvest. And so there's a higher feed to weight conversion ratio in pellet feed compared to mash. And also in pellet feed, one thing you want to also take into consideration is that your bears are always hydrated. The bears are always hydrated. The bears are always, because when they take in pellet, they require more water to digest this pellet and to make it digestible for their system. So if you compare pellet with mash, you now discover that the mash, when they take it, they just take water and it quickly digests and stuff like that. But the pellet feed, it takes, a longer time to digest, and it, because of their high intake of water, it increases their level of body to weight conversion ratio, feed to weight conversion ratio. So it is better to go for pellet than mash. And currently in my farm, I'm trying to switch to pellet. I've started that on my laying bears already. I've switched to pellet, and I can see good results coming out from it. So I advise you should go that too. Now, also, if you notice about pellet has almost 100% of no waste. When you give them pellet, you discover that there's no waste. There's no waste in pellet feed. When you feed them with pellet, there's always no waste. Why? Because they don't tend to scatter it around. They just pick it and eat. But when you feed them with mash, you see them selecting. So the process of selecting grains, they tend to waste it on the floor. And once it gets wasted on the floor, it gets mixed with their feces, their pass out, you discover that they don't have anything to do with that feed on the floor anymore. And it's also not advisable for them to feed from the floor, which is already mixed with their droppings. So it's better for you to go with pellet, because there's absolutely no waste. I really haven't seen any wastage in my pellet feed. While I was feeding my layer chickens, I haven't noticed any wastage in the pellet feed. So I advise you to do so. And also, study shows that pellet has approximately 30% more calories than mash feed. Pellet feed has 30% more calories. Well, I'm not a scientist, I don't know why, but of course that's what study shows. And you can see from the results, everyone who is using pellet, you can see their result is always different from someone who is using mash. And also, another important factor you need to consider is that pellet feed reduces spread of disease. Pellet feed reduces spread of disease. Now, when you feed your bears with mash, you discover that at the end of the day, those ones that dropped on the floor, there are some who are not yet satisfied, who are not satisfied up to their peak level, and they get to peck on the ground where their droppings has dropped. Now, pecking on those grounds, they begin to eat their droppings. Their droppings also mix with the feed, and they eat everything together. And there are some diseases that comes in it, like some microorganisms that are available in their droppings that causes E. coli and coccidiosis. So coccidiosis and E. coli are very common in droppings. This is very transferable from their droppings. So when they take it, you discover that they continue transferring it, and before you know, disease spread around your farm. But when you pellet, once they pick it and take it, that's the end of it. That's the end of it. Also, if you notice when they are taking mash, there are some bears that when they go to drink from the drinking water bowl, you discover that they drop the feed already choked up in their mouth. They put it back in the water. And this also transfers diseases. This also transfers diseases in your farm. You also increase the spread of disease. But if you go with pellet, there's a lower chance of spread of disease. Since I started using pellet, there have been a lot of differences I couldn't even measure. Pellet is always better. than mash. So I advise you to do so. Go for pellet. Go for pellet. Go for pellet, because even on their eating hours, chicks, the chickens, you discover that they spend up to, less than 30 minutes or less than an hour to finish devouring the feed in the containers. But if you in their feeders, but if you put them with mash, you discover that they keep eating and eating and eating. So instead of using that energy to eat, they would rather convert the energy to their body weight, to their health, and it makes them more stronger and better. So pellet, for me, is better than mash. So guys, this is it for this video. I will advise you to go with pellet feed, because pellet feed is just good. It's just good. It's just good more than mash. Go with pellet feed. So if you try it out and you see any difference, make sure to leave a comment in the comment section. Also, if you are new to the channel, consider subscribing. This is Solest Farming Estate. We are just beginning our progress, and your life will be blessed. We are coming up with a lot of teachings, with a lot of inspirations to inspire farmers around the world, from Kano State, Nigeria. So make sure you like this video, make sure you subscribe, make sure you click the notification bell, and follow us as we walk through farming in the city of Kano State, Nigeria. Peace.